My husband and I lived with our young children in an apartment complex. As the years went on, this apartment complex started to attract sketchy people. Having lived in these apartments for years, we didn't know anyone who went trick-or-treating in them. We had never had anyone knock on our door on Halloween. Well, one Halloween in question, when my kids were old enough to go trick-or-treating, my husband and I decided to take them to a neighborhood near the apartments. Everything went smooth, and we were only going to knock on a couple of more doors on our way out of the neighborhood, then back to our apartment. All of a sudden, there was a police helicopter circling over the neighborhood with its spotlight on, shining all around us. There was someone over the speaker shouting,
"Police! Come out with your hands up!"
This had repeated multiple times. We hurried out of the neighborhood, not really sure what was going on. We arrived back to our apartment, settling down, then getting the kids in bed. My husband then realized that we hadn't had dinner, so I ran out to grab something for us and then returned with our food. We got our food set out on the table when all of a sudden we heard pounding on our door. It wasn't knocking, it was pounding. We ignored it. Then moments later, we heard that same pounding, and it was even louder the second time. It was around 9:30 at night while this was happening. Most people are done trick-or-treating at that point, and most kids are in bed. And keep in mind, we never had anyone knock on our door on Halloween in all the years that we lived there. We both got a bad feeling. My husband hurried to the door to make sure it was locked, and then asked through the closed door, "Yeah, who is it?" We then got the response, "Trick or treat," but the voice was that of a grown male. My husband just responded back with, "Yeah, we don't have any candy." Then we just stood there for about a minute or so. We didn't hear or see anything else after that. We both went and peered through the window, and the man was gone. Unfortunately, I don't have any further information about who that guy was, what he wanted, or if he was the one that the police wanted. But I got the most terrifying feeling when he pounded on our door that night that I never ever want to experience again. Before I start this story, I'm going to give you some background information. My name is Alice, and I live in a shitty area in Ohio. I recently turned 16 in July, and I was visiting my brother. We were carving pumpkins, as we've done that every year for as long as I can remember. I won't bore you with too many details, but I and my brother, who's 23, who we'll call Zach, decided to go trick-or-treating despite our ages, as we thought it would be a last-year deal since we were never close growing up due to family issues. I went to his place on Halloween just an hour before trick-or-treating started. We got ready, and we headed out as soon as it became the hour to trick-or-treat. We walked down his entire block, which is pretty long. So, as expected, we got our bags filled and were tired. After we departed and I went back to my house, it was that time of the month, if you know what I mean, and I was craving some chocolate. I reached into my candy bag and I grabbed a Snickers bar, and I barely even chewed it due to the taste. It didn't taste normal. It tasted awful, and now I know this wasn't the best decision, but I have animals that I really worry for, so I ran to the bathroom spitting the candy in the toilet. About 45 minutes later, I was watching some random Netflix movie. I started to feel really weird and like I was in a daze of some kind. I was a bit scared, as I had never felt like that before. I was shaking like crazy, and I lost control of my speech. I woke up my grandma, which had worried her as it was after midnight. She couldn't understand me, because like I had mentioned, I had lost control of my speech and I sounded like a drunken idiot. My grandma immediately got up and then rushed to get dressed. I knew that if she drove me, I wouldn't get there fast enough. And I should also mention that I have a leaking heart valve, so I dialed 911 for help. The paramedics said that I was probably just having an anxiety attack, but I knew this couldn't have been the case, as no anxiety attack I've ever had was ever this bad. They loaded me into the ambulance while my family was on their way to meet us there. While in the ambulance, I was still shaking and I was barely staying awake. I kept losing consciousness, and my heart rate was as high as 170, which is really extreme for me as it's usually in the 70s to 90s range. The paramedics got me to the hospital safely though. The nurses at the hospital questioned me about everything, and as I explained the best that I could for my fucked up state of mind, my grandma then came in and stayed with me while they did an EKG on me, as well as x-rays, which neither were a problem. My grandma then spoke up to the doctor and asked if I could do a urine sample, which was agreed on. Less than 30 minutes passed, and the doctor came back and told us that there was THC found in my body, which for those of you who don't know, is tetrahydrocannabinol, also known as a chemical in marijuana. I was thrown back by this, as I had never touched marijuana before in my life, which has me to believe that the candy was definitely laced. I soon called Zach to tell him what happened and to get rid of that candy as soon as possible. I know that this might not be like every other scary story on here, but I wanted to share this with as many people as possible, because this really is something that happens on Halloween, and you really never know what could happen. Please everyone, be safe on your Halloween, and also please check your children's candy. It's absolutely terrifying that people do this, so please be careful. I recalled how my mom always made sure our grandmother felt safe on Halloween. You never know what can happen, and she was always careful to be sure she was safe, and we would go to her house to be with her if she ever opened the door and gave out candy, and we would also spend some time with her that night until the time had passed for the trick-or-treaters to have come. No one was supposed to come after 10 p.m. in our city. I recalled that fondly, and now that I'm grown, offered my elderly neighbor the same. I would spend the evening having a couple of soft drinks and chatting with her at the kitchen table. She didn't want to participate, so I told her our plan. We would turn out the porch lights, lock up the doors tightly, and just talk in low tones in the kitchen with a low light on inside. It was clear that we weren't inviting the Halloweeners. At first, the front doorbell rang, and a rather large group came by with parents at about 7 p.m. That was the last and first group that ever really came by. Our neighborhood has every age group really, but most of the kids went to parties and church functions, as well as our zoo and other places that held events for the kids. It had gotten rather quiet the last several hours, but I stayed and we talked. My neighbor is 87 years old and a lot of fun, and we talked about everything, and we just laughed and sipped our cokes. And the night was totally quiet after the kids had come in that group at 7. I was thinking I'd just walk back across the street in about a minute or two. I live 3 houses down and across the street, and I had brought my car too. You know, so it wouldn't be creepy walking home, and I could just drive into my garage when we said goodbye. I was just about to wrap up our visit when suddenly I heard a very light knock at the side door to the house. She has a steep front porch and she lives up on a hill, and she had no kids come for hours. No one ever knocks lightly anyway. She also had a doorbell on the front door and the back as well that worked. It seemed weird, so we hushed our conversation, and I then walked just in front of her side door and then said almost angrily, "Yeah, can I help you?" At that, I heard a fist turn the brass knob on her security door, then left, then right to see if it had been left open. I don't even think they could hear me in the house at all. They were out there, and they were seeing if we had forgotten to lock our door. Now, I wasn't about to venture out there and figure out who this was, and we weren't answering the door anyway. I knew the shades on the door didn't allow anyone to see inside, so we just waited and listened, and no other sounds came. Nothing bad really happened, but I had failed to wear my pistol on me. I have my concealed carry license, I normally carry, but I had stupidly come over without it on during the Halloween night of all times. I could have needed it that night, and I then realized that as we sat there silently listening for their next move. But we were in the kitchen by a complete knife block anyway. And next year I'll be sure to drop over to be with my elderly neighbor once again. You can be sure of that. Only next time, I'll definitely be sure to be armed. Stay safe, everyone, and enjoy the spooky season. There's this trail near my house that my mom and I often ride bikes on. The trail was plotted and built sometime in the 2010s. Nothing too out of the ordinary has really happened when my mom and I are on the trail, aside from a few close calls with careless bikers, and some people every now and then that just give off creepy vibes. What I'm going to tell you about today, though, is something rather strange. So the two of us used to go a different route sometimes than the one we usually take now. The path that we usually go on now is just overall much more pleasant and mostly goes through fields and forested areas. But the way that we used to go cut through intersections and neighborhoods at some points. One day when we used to go this other way, we noticed a bunch of stuff that looked like Halloween decorations hanging up in the trees not too far from one of those intersections. First of all, the trail is owned by the city, so you can't just go vandalizing it like that. Second, I don't even think this was around Halloween. Also, this wasn't just any Halloween decor. I mean, sure, there was some normal stuff, like a zombie-looking thing hanging from a power line and a few other things near it. But what we found to be even more strange was that there were baby dolls which were a bit further away. They were all dirty and very disfigured, and some of them had missing limbs. There were also some in cages too. I remember one cage held a doll that was ripped apart, and there weren't just a few dolls. There were around 15 or more. There were also life-sized plastic body parts just hanging around, like literally a pair of legs jammed into the side of a tree. This isn't even the weirdest part though. There were also children's shoes hanging from a string as a garland sort of thing, and it was strung between two trees. There were also a few more shoes like these lying about, along with a couple of tricycles. My mom and I were thoroughly and very obviously creeped out by this, and at different times we saw a few other people stop there who were equally concerned. We really wanted to find out who was behind this grotesque display. A few days later, we saw a maintenance man doing his job on the trail, so we alerted him of the situation and we told him where it was, and he said he'd check it out. It was only weeks later when my mom discovered the true culprit, and then she told me about it later that day when I was home. I don't know why, but I wasn't with her today. Of course. She was riding her bike as she always did, going the same way, when, as she passed the side of the strange decorations, she saw a man walking and carrying a large bucket not too far from it. My mom has a phenomenal sense of intuition, so she stopped to ask the man what he was doing. My mom described the man as short and fat, and probably in his mid-60s. He had stringy gray hair, and he was bald on top. She instantly got creepy vibes from this guy. She asked him if he was the man who set up all that stuff in the trees, and he said yes, that he was calling it art, and he said it was a hobby of his. My mom said that it was definitely not art, and she told the guy he was creepy. The man replied, claiming that, well, some people like it, and he tried acting like it was nothing. Yeah, who on earth would think this is normal? I mean, like I said, it wasn't even October or around Halloween. My mom told him again that she thought he was weird, and then sped off. She told me that this guy had a smug grin on his face the whole time she spoke with them. What a freak. No telling what kind of psycho this man truly is, or what he actually hides back at his house. I've always wondered about those shoes and bikes, and where he got them from. I really wish I would have been there to protect my mom if something would have happened, but I'm so glad nothing did. Thank God for that. Also, thankfully the stuff has since been taken down, and there's no sign of the weirdo after this incident. It was Halloween of 2022. I was a freshman in high school. Halloween was on a Monday, and we had school the next day, so we really couldn't be staying up until 10 outside, and we needed to be home around 10 as well. For the sake of privacy, I'll call my friends by letters. My friend D had a history of throwing parties. Since it was a school night, he only invited about 10 people over for Halloween. We all decided we would trick or treat only for about an hour and then come back for a scary movie. We set off at about 6:15, and then the first 30 minutes were just a normal every year Halloween experience. This is where the story starts to take a turn. The neighborhood was huge, so the group ended up splitting up. 3 of my friends went to a different part of the neighborhood. The first part of the story I'll tell from my friend C's point of view, as I wasn't present for it. C and my other 2 friends K and J rolled up on a house where there was nobody home, but there were some really cool decorations and a bowl of candy on the doorstep. All 3 of them decided to hide behind the decorations and then scare the trick-or-treaters. They did so for about 15 minutes before J and K decided to head back to meet up with the rest of us. C then decided to stay and try and scare one more trick-or-treater. Little did he know that the next trick-or-treater would be one to remember. C was hiding behind a skeleton when he saw some creepy guy then walk up. He was wearing a clown mask that looked to be like one of the ones from Dollar Tree, and he was also wearing what looked to be an old raggedy white t-shirt with black sweatpants. The guy looked to be around the age of about 18, and he was alone trick-or-treating. C did his usual scare and jumped out at the guy. The guy didn't flinch at all and didn't say anything. He just stared at C and then grabbed C's candy bag and began circling in the backyard. How he described it was like something when you're a little kid playing football in the yard and you get hit with a bunch of juke moves. Anyway, C got his bag back and he got around the clown and raced away thinking the guy would get lost. C was in a completely different part of the neighborhood than me and some of my other friends, so before he could tell me anything, I also had my first encounter. The clown must have taken a shortcut because he ended up coming up to me not too long after his encounter with C. Now, my other 2 friends T and A were sort of laughing at him while he was looking straight at me. I thought he was one of their friends and they told him to mess with me or something, so I kept trying to talk to him, but he wouldn't talk. Eventually I gave up and I just let the guy walk ahead of us. Who the hell was that guy? You guys know him? I asked T and A. What they said sort of gave me goosebumps. They said they had no idea who he was. Since he looked so young, I didn't really think anything of it until me and C found each other and he then told me what happened. I also told him about my encounter as well, and the whole group decided to go back to the house as it was around 7 at this point. Now, D's house had a side basement entrance, and since we were in the basement and might go back outside at any time, we didn't lock it. After about 10 minutes, the door busted open, and it was the clown guy walking in with what looked to be a gun. We all jumped and started screaming, but we realized from closely looking that the gun he had was fake. He went up to K and tried stealing his candy, but had dropped his bag at the basement steps, and C then picked it up and ran outside. The clown followed C up a hill, and he seemed very mad. He was getting very aggressive at this point, putting his hands on C, so C gave the candy back, wanting no more trouble. The clown then ran away from the house without saying a word. I figured the dude was probably just trying to scare us, but the fact that he followed us home and busted in without knocking still didn't sit right with me. We went back inside for about 30 or so minutes before we heard knocking on the basement door. It was still prime trick-or-treating time. I opened the door and nobody was there. Me and C started to realize that maybe this guy wasn't so dangerous after all, or so we thought. We then decided to try and find him outside and tell him to stop messing with us and go home. After about 15 minutes of searching, we then saw him eerily standing in someone's backyard. We went up to him, but he ran away from us. We saw him once again, and he was in a different person's yard this time. This time, however, he was sitting down with his back facing us, and he had the clown mask off. We couldn't see his face, but it seemed that he had been running a lot and needed to catch his breath. "Hey, why are you running?" I screamed out to him. He didn't turn. He just put his mask back on and just walked near us. I started to get a really uneasy feeling now that he was no longer running away from us, but now slowly walking toward us. Out of nowhere, he starts running towards a random group of trick-or-treaters, looking to scare them, I think. But before he reached them, he then tripped and then face-planted right in the road. Such a terrible way to express himself as the guy trying to scare people. We just laughed at him, but that would be the last time I laughed that night. He got up and started walking away, not even near us, but he seemed defeated. We were trying to find out who the hell this guy was as he was now walking on the side of the road. Then out of nowhere, a car pulled up and then stopped in the middle of the road. The car was small and black, and across the front windshield it had strange letters that looked to be in some sort of different language. The clown then jumped in the front seat of the car, and I saw with the driver a gun, and this time I knew it wasn't fake. He pointed out the window to me and C, and we both ran faster than we ever had back to the house. We didn't have any more trouble for the rest of that night, and we'll never know who it was that was really behind that mask, or why he did what he did. That night could have gone wrong in so many different ways. Moral of the story is don't investigate something creepy that you think will be okay, because you really never know what can happen. Stay safe out there, everyone, and happy Halloween. My friend Sean has neighbors who own this big forest next to their farm. His neighbors don't mind him going into the forest so long as he doesn't go onto their farm. Today, Sean invited some friends and I, Zach, Carl, and Declan. We arrived at around 5 p.m. We had played some basketball for a while until Zach said that we should go into the forest since it was getting dark and that it would be something spooky to do since it's almost Halloween. We walked up to the long pathway to the forest surrounded by a short electrical fence. Once we reached the entrance to the forest, we noticed that the landowner had put up a fence to the entrance. It was electrical, but there was a way past it. Sean and Declan went up ahead, while Carl, Zach, and I then walked in just a minute after them. As soon as we entered, we couldn't see Sean or Declan anywhere. Zach and Carl were walking and talking about the weird mushrooms that were on the ground, until we heard this weird laughter. It was nothing like Sean or Declan's voice, so we knew it wasn't them. A second later, I see Sean and Declan run out of the forest into the pathway to the next forest. I then told Zach and Carl, and we went on after them. It took us a bit to get out of the forest because Zach got stuck. Once we got out and started walking, I noticed Sean and Declan a little bit behind us. There's no way they could have looped around the entire forest in 5 minutes. So as soon as I saw them, I got really confused and then pretty scared. Sean and Declan then explained that they had just got out of the forest and they saw a man in a gray jacket somewhere in or around the forest. We got pretty freaked out by this, so we decided to just keep on walking ahead to the next forest. Sean was talking about an abandoned treehouse further ahead in the next forest, so that's what we wanted to see next. Once we found the entrance, a bunch of cows came over the edge of the fence next to us and they just started staring at us. The cows didn't make a sound, they just stared at us. Zach went in first, and I followed after him. While everyone was talking, I noticed a dark figure at the very end of the forest. I told Declan, but the dark figure was gone as soon as I looked back. Zach walked into the other entrance and found a white bag with blood in it and a ripped sticker. There were also needles and blood smeared all over the trees. Zach refused to go any further after seeing that, and the rest of us all agreed that we should get back home and get the hell out of there. Carl was walking slightly ahead of us, and he apparently saw the dark figure in the distance. Pretty much the whole walk back, we just felt like we were being watched, but nothing else happened aside from that. Thank God. My name is Shelby, and this incident happened on Halloween in 1998. I was 18 years old at the time, and I had been invited to an outdoors bonfire that was going to be held at a distant friend of mine's cornfield. For some context, I live in Tiger, Georgia. Tiger is a very small, isolated town from all the other counties. Our population is roughly about 1,300 people. So when a party is talked about, a lot of people will show up, and not just teenagers, but adults, elders, and even kids. This certain party, though, I swear the whole town was there. Imagine a cornfield, and all the corn in it are people. Yeah, cheesy, but that's the best way I can describe it. Anyways, back to the story. The party was going to start around 5 p.m., and it was a bring your own beer kind of situation. I went alone as I didn't really have many friends. I got to the field around 5:30, and there had to have been at least 200 people there just sitting and chilling. There was another cornfield across from the main one, and that's where everyone was parking at. I then parked, got out, and just stood by my car like a snowman, not knowing who I'd see or really what to do, as I'd never went to these before. Finally, I saw my friend whom threw the party in the first place. His name was Jason. Jason was 19, and he seemed like an easygoing guy. But there was something off about him, and I could never really put my finger on it. Jason and I got to talking about this party, and just being amazed at all the people that had shown up, and no telling who else would. We start walking around and head towards where the concession stands were. I can at this point tell that Jason had either been drunk or had been drinking heavily prior to anyone showing up. While at the concession stand, he starts talking about how there's an old trail out in the woods, and that him and his family use it as a trail riding event, but that they quit after all the mud and rough ruts in it were hard to ride on. He then starts talking about how it's sometime around 6, him and a couple of other friends were going to go walk the trail and see how far they could get on foot without falling or getting lost. He asked me if I would be interested in going to that, as a lot of other girls were going to go as well. I at first felt uneasy, and I thought of it as a real way to get hurt, being how rough the area is. But after he talked to me about it, I felt a little better, and I then agreed to tag along. 6 p.m. rolls around, and Jason and I start heading towards the trail. It was about 200 yards from the bonfire, so we were in a discreet area. As Jason and I are walking along, I realized that there's about 4 other guys walking with us, and they had no girls with them. It was literally just Jason and 4 of his friends. Okay, no big deal, I said in my head. As we're walking, we start to get into the rough parts of the trail, and up over ahead on one of the ruts, I can see what looks like another fire, but this one was much smaller, and there was also some odd death metal music playing. I tap on Jason's shoulder and point while telling him that someone's on his property. He then calmly and creepily replies with, "Oh no, honey, that's for you." Now at this point, I'm slightly feeling anxious, and I kinda just brush off what he says. We all get to the small fire, and Jason then tells me to take a seat on one of the logs. As I'm sitting down, one of the guys that was with us pulls out a blanket and vodka, and then he and the other 3 guys start taking off their shirts, and they then start pouring each other shots. As I'm watching this in utter confusion, Jason walks over to me, and then says, "All right, the fun is about to begin. I hope you brought an extra pair of clothes, But before I could even comprehend what he said, he picks me up, walks me over to the other guys, and drops me on the blanket. Then him and 2 other guys hold me down and use zip ties to tie my hands together. At this point, my adrenaline is going haywire, and I start kicking and screaming and trying everything in my power to get out. Jason then punches me full on in my face and then yells, "Shut up, bitch! You're ruining our mood!" You don't want to do that, because you won't be leaving these woods. They all then surround me and start taking off their pants, as well as telling me how sexy I look. Jason then walks over, and he turns up the music really loud. He then comes back to me and starts trying to yank my pants off of me. I'm still just fighting for my life, and in a glimpse moment, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is it. I'm gonna be raped and killed here. And somehow, out of pure adrenaline, I managed to get my hands out of the zip ties and then full-on punch Jason dead in his balls. Before any of the others could get to me, I jumped up and started sprinting as fast as I could throughout the woods. I didn't even know where I was going. All I could think about was just getting away from there. I ran for what felt like an eternity until I finally managed to make it back to the cornfield. By this time, the bonfire was huge and it was easy to see. Once again, a surge of adrenaline jolts me to start running straight to the fire. Once I get there, there's at least 700 people there hooting and hollering, as well as live music playing and fireworks totally going off. I ran straight to one of the deputies that was standing guard near the parking lot, and I then explained everything that happened to him. He could see my nose being busted and my pants ripped, along with the zip ties cut into my arm, that I wasn't joking. He calls an ambulance for me, and him and 4 other cops that were there asked me where it took place, as well as who were involved and if they had any weapons. I was so traumatized at the time that I couldn't really speak full sentences. All I could really muster out was, Jason and 4 other guys on the trail, and I then pointed in the direction it was in. They all started going in that direction, as a female deputy stayed with me and waited for the ambulance to arrive. This incident, of course, drew a lot of attention, and there was about 15 people asking me different questions while also trying to comfort me. Once the ambulance finally got there, they checked me out and they told me I had a broken nose, as well as some bad bruising on my wrists, and where Jason had torn my pants, my zipper had actually cut my lower stomach. They took me to the hospital, and on my ambulance ride there, the paramedics were asking me what all I remembered while also comforting me. I honestly couldn't remember much at the time because it all happened so fast. So to cut everything short, after the doctors fixed me up at the hospital, 2 investigators came to question me about the incident, and after I had told them everything that had happened, they then told me that they had Jason in custody and that he also had previous charges against him for sexual assault that he had committed, but was still ongoing. As far as the 4 other guys with him, I found out that they had caught 3 of them that night, that they had passed out drunk, and that they gave up, I guess, after I ran. Their names were Chad, Brian, and Daniel. And as for the 4th guy that was with them, he was never caught. Jason had run after me after I ran, but quit due to how drunk he was. All 3 men were charged with kidnapping, attempted rape, and aggravated assault. I've tried finding their arrest report on our news page, but it was so long ago, I don't think it's up to date anymore. I'm now married, and I don't go out much, and I still have trauma memories that pop up, but therapy has really helped me out a lot. So to all those guys, and to the 4th guy that never got caught, I really hope all of you rot in hell. I'm a 24-year-old female with strawberry blonde hair, blue eyes, and light freckles. As many girls experience, I was pretty used to getting catcalls from strange men on the street or in stores, but this situation was much, much different. This happened to me on Halloween of 2019 when I was a junior in college. I was 20 years old, a few months shy of my 21st birthday. My roommates had turned 21 that past summer, and they wanted to go out to the bars for Halloween weekend. They asked me if I would drive them to the bar so they didn't have to Uber, and I agreed, since our other friend who's also 20 said he would be on pickup duty. I was hanging out with my boyfriend in his dorm with his friends when they texted me saying they were ready. When I met up with them, they were already tipsy from their pregame, dressed up as the sun and moon. We hopped in my car, and I drove them to the bar about 10 minutes away from campus. When I got back on campus, I was really excited to see the spot I parked in was still open. It's parallel parking on a side road, and was a closer walk to my dorm than parking in the parking garages. It's important to note that since these streets are university property, the security cameras on campus don't reach that far. Anyways, I wasn't surprised that there weren't a lot of people out yet. It was still early, about 9 p.m., and most people start walking to off-campus house parties around 10, as my roommates and I had done plenty of times before. I parked my car, and I began my short trek back to my boyfriend's dorm. The night was dark and chilly, and I was wearing an oversized sweatshirt and leggings. Nothing special. I was all alone, no one else around on the sidewalks. I barely paid any mind to the old rusty Navy van that was passing me. That is until I saw it slowly coming to a stop when there was no stop sign or stoplight. I thought to myself how ironic it was for it to be a stereotypical pedo van on the prowl on Halloween night. But what really freaked me out was the person who rolled down the window and then shoved their head out from the passenger side window. They were wearing a mask of an old man, which just made the whole thing much worse. I stared at him, still walking, and the van rolled slowly beside me to keep my pace. I figured it was just some college students pulling a prank, since it was Halloween after all. The guy in the old man mask stuck out his arm pointing at me, and then gestured for me to go over to him. I just shook my head and kept walking, looking away to show that I wasn't interested in whatever they were trying to do.
Hey, I'm talking to you, bitch! Come here!
He yelled at me. I was taken aback by this, and I stopped walking, turning towards him again. As I did, the sliding door on the side of the van opened up, and two more men wearing those creepy-ass old men masks then appeared, once again calling me a bitch and telling me to get into the van. As much as I hate to say it, all I did was just stand there, frozen. The guys at the open sliding door began to get out of the van towards me. The only thing I could do was just stand there frozen. Just then, I had heard more voices up ahead of me. Coming down from the hill from campus were a group of about 4 college guys drunk out of their minds, and they were yelling at the guys in the van.
Hey, what the fuck do you think your guys are doing? Get the fuck out of here! Leave her alone!
At this, the masked men quickly got in the van and then shut the sliding door as the van took off up the hill. The group of boys then asked if I was okay, but all I could do was nod and then quickly walk away to make it back to my boyfriend's dorm. I told my boyfriend as well as his friends what had happened, and they were livid, wanting to go out and see if they could find the van lurking around campus. But I just convinced them not to and to just continue our movie. So the next day, my boss at my on-campus job convinced me to report it to the campus police and then drove me there as support. The officer took my note and checked the cameras, but unfortunately, because it was right off the campus, there was no video footage nor any other reports made of those men in the van. So there really wasn't much they could do. But at least there was a report on file in case those sick fucks decided to come around campus again to harass girls by themselves. I don't really know if it was just some disgusting joke they were trying to pull, or if they were actually going to take me and do God knows what. I'm just glad those drunk guys from my college were there to scare them off. Stay safe, and always pay attention to your surroundings, especially if you're alone. A few years ago, I belonged to a very questionable group of friends. Around September of 2014, I would always hang out with my best friend Elizabeth, her boyfriend Anthony, and Anthony's best friend Hunter, and their other friend Matt. When I first joined the friend group, I thought Hunter was very cute, and I wanted to get to know him some more. He was bearded with tattoos and had a nose ring. I thought he was the most handsome guy ever. The three of the guys were in a pop-punk band, so we would always hang out at band practice. Anthony played guitar, Hunter played bass, and Matt was the singer. I don't recall the drummer and other guitarist names, but they're not very important in this story. After practice, we would all hang out around empty parking lots, parks, and Hunter's mom's house too. His mom was never home, so it was an anything goes kind of environment. The guys would all get stoned and drunk and act like idiots, while Elizabeth and I would just hang out. She eventually told me that Matt was interested in dating me, but I told her that he wasn't really my type. He seemed like a nice guy, but that was all he really was. A nice guy. I had my eyes set on Hunter. He was more of a player bad boy type, and I think I just wanted to change him. After a month of the five of us hanging out, Hunter and I decided to start seeing each other, but he would never let us have a deeper relationship. October had just come around, and I was very excited to get into the Halloween festivities with my group of friends. They knew a bunch of people in our town throwing Halloween parties. One night before a party, Hunter was supposed to pick me up, but of course he stood me up. I was so upset when I saw him post himself at the party on Instagram. I was about to change and get into bed when I received a knock at my door. It was Matt. Hey Matt, I said. What's up, dude? He told me that he was hoping to see me at the party, but I didn't show up. When I told him about Hunter, he started to shake his head and tell me that Hunter always does this. He's not the best guy when it comes to girls. You can do better, he told me. He then offered to take me for a ride and maybe hang out in the park. I agreed to this since I was already dressed and I didn't want to spend the night alone. He took me to the park and we got into a very deep conversation. You know, I've dealt with a toxic love interest too, he said. She was my best friend in high school, and we spent every waking day together, but she just only wanted to be friends. I took her to our school's homecoming and she would even tell me that she wished all men were like me. I asked him what happened to her, and he told me that his constant acts of kindness were just never enough. He didn't really go into detail, but he did say that they can no longer communicate, and that she's having a kid with some idiot. He used really mean names when talking about her. He would call her things like loser and slut, which seemed really harsh coming from Matt, but I didn't try and overthink it. I mean, he had the right to be heard, I guess. The conversation got really weird when he randomly told me that I was much prettier than her. He also began to ask me personal questions about Hunter and I. He asked if we ever had sex and just really personal questions. We had actually never had sex, and when I told Matt that, he told me it was a good thing. You should definitely hold off on sleeping with Hunter. I know you aren't some kind of whore that spreads your legs to guys like him. He then went on a rant about how he was still a virgin and how badly he wanted to lose his virginity to a good girl who could be his wife. I went home later that night, and I thought long and hard about some of the advice Matt gave me. I knew in my heart that I would break things off with Hunter, but to my surprise, he texted me the next day to break things off himself. Just a few hours after we broke up, I got a call from Matt. Hey, I heard about you and Hunter. His loss. Trust me, you'll bounce back and you'll meet a great guy eventually, he said. Hey, while we're on the phone, why don't we go to dinner? He asked. I couldn't really think of an excuse to bail, so I just accepted. He then told me he would be over very soon. I wasn't expecting it, but Matt showed up maybe like 6 minutes after I hung up on the phone. almost as if he was already in my neighborhood before he called. I told him I had to get ready and to just wait on my couch in my living room. Then my mom was in the kitchen doing dishes. I had heard him introduce himself, and he began to take over the dishes. "A lady like you should rest. Why don't you let me handle the dishes?" he told my mom. This made me a little uncomfortable, but I let it slide. After about 15 minutes of getting ready, I stepped into the living room to see him going through my record collection near the record player in our living room. He was holding on to my Taylor Swift record and began to stare in my eyes and began singing a song very loudly to me. This made me so uncomfortable and creeped me out. I could see my sister in the kitchen cringing and trying not to laugh. He kept going for what seemed like half an hour until I then giggled and said we should be leaving. The entire car ride consisted of Matt talking smack on Hunter, which was just what I needed in that moment. Hunter wasn't exactly my favorite cup of tea at the time. At the restaurant, he was very polite and had great manners. He even paid for our meal and kept me entertained with jokes. By the end of the night, he dropped me off, and when he hugged me goodbye, he forcefully kissed me. I didn't know what to do, so I just laughed awkwardly. The next few days were, well, rough. He would show up every day with flowers as if we were dating. He would leave creepy love notes in my car mailbox and taped to my window. I knew this could only go on for so long, so I knew that I had to break things off with him. I tried to ask Elizabeth to tell him I wasn't interested and that I needed space, but she was kind of a bitch about it. You need to tell him in order to spare his feelings. Adults don't get other adults to break up for them, she would say. The saddest part was that I wasn't even dating him. It was like he was forcing himself to be my boyfriend beyond my will. After a few days of not texting him back and ignoring his calls, I had woken up to a frightening encounter. I opened my eyes in the middle of the night, and I could see Matt standing by my window. He had this blank smile on his face. I screamed, and he then came into my room through my window. "Shh," he said. "You don't want to wake up your hardworking mother, do you? I hadn't heard from you today, and I was worried sick, so when I came by, I couldn't help but watch you sleep. You look so beautiful and peaceful. Sorry for waking you." I told him that he had to go and that I didn't want him to come over again. Matt had finally got the hint that he was being a little pushy and that he was getting out of hand. Or at least I thought so. On Halloween night, Elizabeth, Anthony, and I went to a friend's costume party, where we're all dressed up and having a great time. There was a ton of people in costume, so it started to get hard to tell who was who. I noticed a man in a full-body Ninja Turtle costume. He was kind of alone, but would wave at me every time I would see him. Whenever I would try and approach him, he would somehow quickly disappear. I ended up getting pretty hammered after a few rounds of beer pong, so I was getting ready to head home. I let Morgan know that I was going upstairs to use the restroom and that I'd meet her outside when I was done. Whenever I was finished, I then stepped into the long empty hallway to see the man in the Ninja Turtle costume. He started to walk towards me very quickly, and before I knew it, he then shoved me in the bathroom and then locked the door. He then unmasked himself to then reveal that he was Matt. "I've missed you," he told me. "It's good to know that I'll finally be losing my virginity tonight. Thanks, slut. Now do what you're good at." He then pulled his pants down, and he had also pulled out a printed image of Hunter's face and then set it down on the countertop. "Just look at him while I'm screwing you, and you'll never know the difference." I screamed. He covered my mouth and told me to be quiet. I then kicked him in the groin and then screamed at the top of my lungs. He then put his Ninja Turtle mask right back on and then ran out of the hallway before anyone could come. I just stayed in the bathroom crying and screaming until someone came to help. Thankfully, nothing else happened to me that night. I eventually told all of Matt's friends about this incident, and they all cut him off. The band eventually broke up, and so did our group of friends. Matt hasn't been present on social media ever since. I have no idea what he's up to anymore, and I don't care to find out. This was Halloween of 2019. I decided to go trick-or-treating with two of my friends. For my costume, I was wearing a prom dress and heels. This is important to the story, I promise. We decided to go to the rich neighborhood next to ours to get better candy, but didn't tell our parents. Dumb, I know, but they wouldn't let us go if we told them. In order to get there though, we had to go through a slim wooded path no larger than 2 feet wide and very overgrown, rough, and then through a field. After about an hour and a half of trick-or-treating and our pillowcases filled to our liking, we decided to leave. It was near pitch black but light enough that we didn't need flashlights to navigate home. This also wasn't our first time cutting through to get to the rich neighborhood. We had walked most of the field, approaching the wooded path, when we then saw a flashlight. All three of us stopped dead in our tracks and pulled out our phones to turn on the flashlights on our phones. After about 5 minutes of looking around, we couldn't find where the light came from, and we decided to just brush it off, still a bit shaken. This is when things go down. I was first in line with my two friends behind me. We thought someone was behind us, but it was dark and we couldn't really see anything, so we just thought it was us just being scared 13-year-old kids. That's when we all heard a snap of a twig. We began sprinting through the wooded path getting scraped. When we were almost out of the woods, the mix of uneven ground along with my heels made my ankle roll, and I nearly fell. I was able to catch myself on a branch and then stand back up and kept running. The friend last in line, who I'll call Sarah, looked behind her, and there was a man a few feet behind us. Sarah then screamed at me to hurry the hell up, so I listened and I began to run even faster somehow. We exited the woods and got into our own neighborhood, running about 100 feet into our neighborhood before we stopped. We turned around and looked, and no one was behind us anymore. We then walked the rest of the way to our house, most of our families back inside due to it being late in the night. Let's just say I was never so excited to see my parents outside with their candy bucket. For every teen out there trick-or-treating, please tell your parents where you're going, and always be aware of your surroundings, because you might not get as lucky as we were. It was the early morning of Halloween in 1992. I was doing laundry. I lived in a nice side-by-side apartment with a laundry room about 6 doors down. We each had a small gated backyard. I'd go out my kitchen door through the back gate, turn right, and then walk to the laundry room. It was around 5 a.m. My plan was to get my laundry done, then travel to my mother's house about 2 hours away. Now, I had a black cat that followed me to and from the laundry room, but she would walk along the top of the back wall of each apartment's backyard area. On one of my trips back to my apartment from the laundry room, a man seemed to appear from the back parking lot walking towards the street. He was around 5'8", had a ponytail, was wearing a jogging suit type thing, and I thought he was heading out for a run. I went into my apartment and set a kitchen timer so I could get clothes right into the dryer and then another load into the washer. I put the load in the dryer and started another wash. As I headed back to my apartment, I saw that same man again. Just like before, he was headed toward the street. I felt a bit off after this second encounter. I felt him watching me walk, even though I'd kept him in my line of sight. Something was up. I packed some things and my timer went off. Time to check the dryer. I stepped outside my back door and my cat was on the wall waiting, but she kept looking over her shoulder and down. I think that man was hiding and she was tipping me off. I then went back inside and grabbed my biggest kitchen knife. I then went to check the dryer and came back. More packing. Timer went off. Headed back to the laundry room. As I closed the dryer, I then saw movement outside the door. I grabbed the doorknob and opened the door with all the bluster I could muster. It was him. He was turned sideways behind a light pole trying to hide from me. I then hollered, "What's up?" And he peeked out from behind the pole.
"What the hell are you doing?"
I demanded, making eye contact. He started toward me. I stilled myself. This laundry room locked from the inside. The last thing I wanted was to be trapped inside there. He veered to his left and walked behind the building. I then thought to myself that I dodged a bullet. Fast forward a week, and the guy's face was on the TV. He had apparently held 2 women at knife point and assaulted the both of them on Halloween evening, and he was also implicated in other similar attacks. I called the police and told them my story. When the investigator asked me why I didn't call the police, I then explained because, well, nothing really happened. I was willing to cooperate with identifying him if need be. I still don't know if they ever caught the guy. I'm a 31-year-old male, and this happened about 15 or 16 years ago when I was a freshman in high school. Myself, my girlfriend at the time, and a group of our friends who were all female except for me decided to go trick-or-treating one final time. Now, towards the end of a fun evening, we decided to go to a house. The urban legend said that it was John Wayne Gacy's mother's house. It wasn't, but that was what all the rumors said. Now, every year people would spray paint things like clown or threatening messages on the garage of the house. So we're just standing on the sidewalk just looking at all of this. Well, anyways, this old lady who must have been in her 70s or 80s comes running out of the house with a loaded shotgun. She then fires it right into the air and then proceeds to run after us at full sprint, firing the shotgun at us. We all, of course, took off like a bat out of hell and ran away. Luckily, we eventually outran her and literally ran straight into a cop out patrolling. Funny enough, he had received multiple calls of that same lady being threatening and acting violently towards people, including small children, all night long. But as she apparently had dementia, they couldn't really do too much to her. That was when we told him about the gun, which, number 1, this was a small town in California, and 2, with her history of mental illness, she wasn't supposed to have it. I know the cops came and took her gun away, and then arrested her, where she ended up being put in some sort of home, but we were never called to testify or anything. I don't know anything else that happened to her, but as a 14 or 15-year-old kid getting shot at, that was one of the scariest moments I'd ever had in that point in time. The story happened late October of 2022. It was my senior year of high school. My girlfriend Jade and I decided to go to a party that was to celebrate our football season, which had recently just ended. I had played football for 8 years at this point, and Jade had been doing cheerleading for 10 years. We felt like we should attend to give a proper send-off to our respective sports. Plus, I knew the host pretty well. We'll call him Jake, because he was also on the team and he had the house all to himself. The plan was for me to be the designated driver for Jade, my friend who we'll call Michael, and his girlfriend who we'll call Morgan, who were also coming along with us. Michael lives 2 cities away. Him and his family moved his senior year, and he decided to just finish high school in our city. Besides the main downtown area that's our state capital, our cities aren't very big, so Michael was only a 20-minute drive. This is important for later. Halloween was right around the corner, so that was the theme of the party. I went as Jack Skellington, just wearing the suit, and had Jane do my makeup to look like a skeleton while she went as Sally. Michael went as Chucky, and Morgan went as his bride. I'm like 90% sure her name is Tiffany, but if I'm wrong, I apologize. Anyways, we go to the party and a lot more people than I expected showed up. Basically the entire cheer squad, almost the entire football team, and even people from our rival high school, their football team and their cheer squad there as well. And like what you would expect from a typical high school party. People didn't know how to control their drinking, and well, things got really rowdy. I was playing a tag team beer pong game with Michael against 2 other friends when a familiar voice called my name. I turned to look, and it was a kid from our high school who we'll call Bob, wearing a Jason mask and his usual hoodie with jeans. Now, Bob was an odd specimen to say the least. I met him in my first term history class when he randomly came up to me and started talking to me. From the start, I could tell that he wasn't very good at socializing. Being on the football team, people expect me to be stuck up, but I try to be very open and nice with everyone, so I got to know him pretty well in that class. A little too well, in fact. He would openly tell me and my other friends in class about his frustrations about being single and a virgin, and how desperate he was to lose his virginity. He also didn't really know how to read a room or pick up on social cues. He also would talk like we've been buddies forever, and would make really unusual or out-of-pocket jokes. He also had really well-off parents. Both of them drove sports cars, and he lived in a huge house. Despite this though, he would wear the same clothes almost every day and had really long, greasy hair. He would also start high-fiving me in the hallway, which wasn't a big deal because it was just one more person to high-five on my way to class. Well, not long after that, I knew someone who went to junior high with him, and Jade told me how he had the biggest crush on her in junior high, and how he was only trying to be friendly with me to get closer to her. That didn't make much sense to me at the time, so I try not to look at him differently, but the thought had always lingered in my head. Especially since when he would high-five me, Jade was always there, and he would try to stick around a little longer and always include himself in the conversation. Again, I had no problem with this, especially because he wasn't stalking me 24/7. It's just at times I found it mildly annoying and creepy. He started small talk and I had tried to answer his questions as much as I could, but to be honest, I was way more focused on the beer pong game. He left me alone after a while. The party started to die down and I was sitting in a circle with some teammates reminiscing over our times on the team and talking about how we'd really miss it when I decided to rally my group and head out. Jade was sitting in a circle of her own with the cheer team maybe 5 feet away from me, probably doing the same thing, so gathering her wasn't that hard. The hard ones to find were Michael and his girlfriend. I tried calling Michael, but he didn't answer, and I didn't have his girlfriend's number. Our first assumption was that they were probably just making out or something in a bedroom. So we went about the house knocking on door to door, opening them and seeing if there was anyone there, then shutting the door. Bob saw me and Jade appear into a room and closed the door when he then came up to us and said, "Whoa, what are you guys trying to do in there?" in a joking tone that just came off as creepy and awkward. I asked him if he'd seen our friend and he just replied no, so we kept looking. Bob then started following us around, which I was starting to get annoyed with. I eventually found Michael in the bathroom puking his guts out in the toilet with his girlfriend. While he was finishing up, I went to my friend Jank and thanked him for his hospitality, and I offered to come over the next day to help him clean up. He said it was okay, that he actually had some people spending the night, including his girlfriend, who was going to help him in the morning. I still told him I would stop by if he needed help. We were heading to my car when I had then heard Bob say, "Hey man, could you give me a ride?" I was a little annoyed because I was already pretty tired, and I already had to drive out of the way to drop off Michael, Morgan, and Jade, but I just said yes anyways because I'm nice. I also didn't mind driving up to his neighborhood because there were a lot of nice houses, and around the Halloween season they're really fun to look at. I dropped him off first and started to drive to Michael's, which was now probably going to be a 25-minute drive, and it was already around 2:30 a.m. at this point. Morgan was spending the night at his house, so after dropping them off, I had started to drive back to our city. Jade had offered spending the night because I was tired, and I thanked her profusely. We got to my house, and after I changed and washed off as much of the makeup as I could, I just about crashed in my bed. I woke up to Jade in the bathroom that connected to my room. She apologized for waking me up and then laid down next to me. After a couple of seconds, she then got up and asked if I heard that. I listened and heard footsteps right above my window well. My room is in the basement of my house, so the footsteps would be in our backyard in the west alleyway between our house and our gate and fence. "It's probably just raccoons," I said. "No, they sound too heavy to be a raccoon," Jade then said. It's probably just Bear, I said, referring to my 100-pound Malamute. No, we locked his doggy door, remember? She asked. He has a special doggy door that only opens when it senses this fob that we keep on our dog's collar. This keeps the raccoons out. It also had an option to completely lock, so even with the fob, the door won't open. I didn't remember locking it, but I also didn't have an answer, so I just stayed silent. She then got up. Where are you going? I asked, and she then replied that she was going to check if it really was Bear. I would really feel bad if I had let her go check it out alone. On my way up the stairs to the first floor, I saw my dog sleeping in front of the basement door, so it couldn't have been him. But now I was curious, so I go to our backyard door and opened it and then stepped out onto the porch. I looked around and couldn't really see much from on the porch with the porch light, so I stepped down and started investigating with my phone flashlight. I could see the glow of my LED lights through my window and didn't really see anything else. That's when an animatronic in my west side neighbor's backyard went off, scaring me. It was some sort of crypt keeper thing that has green glowing eyes and talks. My neighbors love Halloween, so they have decorations in their front and backyard. I jumped and this caused me to speedily walk back inside. Jade had asked me if I saw anything, and I just said no because I really didn't. We got back into my bed and I fell asleep. I woke up again in the middle of the night to the sounds of the animatronic going off yet again. I just assumed it was a motion sensor or something, and it was picking up a stray cat or raccoons, then went back to sleep. I woke up again in the middle of the night because of my LED lights. I like having them on while I try to sleep, but after I sleep they really bother me, and mine doesn't have a timer. I heard the animatronic again, but this time when I turned off the lights, I was surprised to see my window well glowing green. We have barred covers over them so that nothing can get down in them, but the well was glowing green and it sounded like the animatronic was right above my well. I was now freaked out. I don't know how Jade stayed asleep, but I laid there scared to move or anything. Eventually it stopped. I just sat there for a while awake, trying to calm down. I thought that it had to be someone messing with me, so after scrolling through my phone a bit to get tired again, I fell back to sleep. I woke up the next morning and saw my LED lights were still off, so I definitely wasn't dreaming about it last night. While Jade was getting ready, I called Michael to see if he was messing with me. He didn't answer. He was probably still asleep from being hammered last night. I then realized, why would Michael drive all the way over to my house drunk just to mess with me? I know his girlfriend wouldn't drive him either because she's more of a homebody type. Then it hit me. Our neighbors have a son who's my age. In fact, he played on the football team as well, and I knew him very well. I called him and I was actually surprised when he answered. I started telling him about the animatronic scaring me while I was outside, but I didn't mention the part to him about it being above my well. I wanted him to think that I just slept through it and that he went through all that work just for me to sleep through it like a baby. Well, he then told me that all of the animatronics should be unplugged because he and his family are out of town for the weekend and that they wanted to prevent an electrical fire or anything of that nature. I've known him for a while and I know that he can't lie very well, so this really caught me off guard. I also realized that I didn't see him at the party, so he really was probably out of town. I asked if I could go over and just make sure that they were unplugged. I texted Michael to call me when he was awake. Jade was finished and she said she would come along because she wanted to hang out with Jake's girlfriend. I explained how we have to go over nearby to check on all the animatronics, and she came with me. I went straight to the skeleton one to see if it was plugged in. It was unplugged. I followed the wire up and down at least 3 times just to make sure I was holding the right unplugged wire. I was. When we got there, the mess was already picked up besides a few cups. I went down to the basement to get another box of garbage bags with Jake, and I then saw a Jason mask on the floor. I picked it up and it was Bob's. The events of last night hit me. The footsteps, the skeleton. I wondered if it was Bob in my backyard. I thought there was no way. He doesn't even know where I live. He also isn't very coordinated, so seeing him carry an animatronic is just something that I couldn't even imagine. We did find it weird though how we would find his mask in the basement of the house, the one part that was off limits. Michael called me later in the day. I explained everything to him, and he was adamant that it wasn't him. I still don't know if those footsteps were connected with the animatronic, and I still don't know if Bob was even connected to those events. After that though, he had started acting even more strange. Either that or my mind really was open to how odd he was. Either way, as Halloween comes up, those neighbors have continued to put the Crypt Keeper in their front yard, and I still wonder to this day what happened on that chilly October night. The year of 2003 was a tough one for my family and I. My mother and father had just gone through a divorce, and my father was working late one Halloween night. I was 14 and my sister was 7, so my dad trusted me to take my little sister Emily trick-or-treating. When Emily and I had gotten back from school, I had noticed a piece of paper on my mailbox. It was just a piece of paper that said, "I would die for you." As you can imagine, this gave me the chills, so I brought it in to show my dad, but he wasn't home. He must have left the house early for work, so I decided to just throw it away and not let Emily know about it. That night, our plan was to go out and hit every house and get more candy than ever. We went out and we had a very fun time, and I even ran into some friends. We were on our walk back home when we had heard a voice coming from someone's house. "Hey kids, hey, come over here," a man said. We looked around and we didn't see anyone until Emily grabbed me and then screamed and pointed at the window. There was a man dressed like a clown. "Come in. I have Play-Doh and I have any candy here you can imagine." We then ran as fast as we could down the road screaming until we finally made it home. Once I got home, I realized that our front door wasn't just unlocked, but wide open. I remember saying hello a few times until I figured that maybe the wind just blew our door open. We sat in the living room and tried to just forget all about our encounter with the strange clown in the window. We were counting our Halloween candy and watching Hocus Pocus until we had heard someone knock at the door. We knew that it couldn't be our dad and knew for a fact that it wasn't our mom. "Who's there?" I said. There was a long pause until the person responded, "I'm Jesus Christ. I'm here to save you from the evil of Halloween." Emily screamed and we then ran into our dad's room with the door locked. I tried calling our dad a few times, but he wouldn't answer. Then we saw a figure near the window of my dad's room. It was a person standing there in a suit with a pig's mask. "It's okay. I'm Jesus, and I died for the sins of the children," he said. We then hid behind our father's bed and were scared shitless. We could hear him tapping the window and humming some strange song. "Let me in or I'll slit my wrist tonight when I watch you sleep," he said. We both just laid on the floor shaking in fear. Emily had started to cry, and I had to stay strong for her. After a while, the man had left, but my sister and I still stayed in the same spot behind our dad's bed for over an hour until my dad got home. We told him what happened, and he didn't even really care or listen much. He just wanted to rest after a long day of work. The very next day, we had had a disc on our front porch. It was a blank DVD disc that had "Do not watch unless you love Jesus" written all over it with Sharpie. I went into my room and started watching it on my PlayStation 2. It was some of the scariest and disturbing imagery I had ever seen. It was just very disturbing images of a very, very tall man walking in the woods on stilts in a suit. The video would cut with a VHS static effect to a silhouette of a man in a field on a cross. It would just keep cutting to random disturbing images. One other image I remember was in black and white of an extremely overweight man in bed with a ton of white face paint eating out of a tub of ice cream with his bare hands. The video had no other sound than a slight static sound in the background. I gave the DVD to my dad and told him what had happened, and he said he would take a look. That was the last I'd ever seen of that DVD, and my dad never mentioned anything of it again. He told me that he just threw it away and didn't really get a chance to watch it. I guess if my dad didn't care, then neither should I. I wonder who that could have been and why they wanted to scare a child so damn badly. Were they really dangerous, or were they just playing some really sick prank? I guess I'll never know. The year of 2014 was one of my favorite times in my life. I had just graduated high school, got my first job, and was ready for life to really begin. My high school buddies and I were still very close since we all lived in the same area. We kept our weekend shenanigans for as long as we could, until sometime in our early 20s when we all parted ways. Some of those memories we made really have a special place in my heart, but there's one incident that will rest in my memory in the most unsettling way. It was early October of 2014, and my friends and I were really excited for all of the fun we would get into during the Halloween season. There were tons of parties, haunted houses, as well as bonfires throughout the season. One night, me and two friends and their girlfriends were looking for something spooky to get into. It was myself, my buddy James, his girlfriend Morgan, and Trevor and his girlfriend Allison. I was the single guy of the group, and it never really bothered me to be the fifth wheel when hanging out with them. Trevor mentioned this old cemetery in our town that we were all familiar with. The cemetery was really creepy since there was an Indian burial ground smack in the middle of it. Our plan was to use one of those stupid ghost hunting apps, drink beer, smoke some pot, and just hang out and maybe see if something creepy would happen if we were lucky. When we arrived, there were no lights in the cemetery, and it was very dark. The cemetery was closed and gated, so we had to jump a fence to get in. I led the way with my iPhone flashlight since the other two guys were comforting their scared girlfriends. We were having a good time until Allison swore that she saw someone. We all thought she was full of it, but she swore there was a person in the woods. This really creeped me out, but I didn't let it bother me. I was young and overly confident in my ability to kick someone's ass if placed in a bad situation, so I played the tough guy. Don't worry, Allison. If there's someone actually out there, trust me, they don't want to mess with us, and I'll make damn sure of it, I said with a smirk. After a few minutes of ghost hunting, we all then heard a cough come from the top of the burial ground. It was hard to see up there since it was dark, and a big tree stood right on top of it. I wanted to be the hard ass of the group, so I had started walking close to it. "Hello?" I said as I started to walk up the hill. I heard and saw nothing, so I started to turn around. Then as I was heading back to my group of friends, we all heard the sound of an acoustic guitar playing. We all froze in silence and listened. We started to follow the music and we could hear the man singing a song about a skeleton. The lyrics were something like, "Poor skeleton, I've waited for you. Poor skeleton, I'll take you home." The girls were far behind as they refused to go anywhere near the music. Trevor stood back with them as James and I went to go see who would be playing music in a cemetery this late at night. We hid behind a tree as we watched a skinny middle-aged man with a fedora play a song. He was alone, and it seemed like he thought he was the only one in the cemetery. He then stopped playing and then just stared at the tree where we were hiding. I decided not to startle the guy, so I stepped from behind the tree. "Hey man, I heard your music and I wanted to get a listen. Sounds good," I said as he just continued to stare at us. "We were just ghost hunting and having some beer. We hope you don't mind," I said to him. The man just sat there still as a statue and just stared at us. I still get chills whenever I think of him just sitting there in the pure darkness right next to a grave. You couldn't see his face since the fedora mostly covered it. We began walking back to the girls and Trevor when we then heard the man then say, "Yeah, sure." James and I just stood there. When we turned around, he was in the same spot but standing. "What was that?" James said. The man started running towards us, and in an instant reaction, we ran off. The rest of our friends saw us running and thought we were just messing around. "Let's go! We have to go!"
I said. "He's coming after us."
Trevor and the girls just laughed and made jokes. They thought we were kidding until they then saw him appear from the darkness.
"This is my cemetery,"
the man said.
"You think you belong here? You think you can laugh and make fun of me?"
We stood there frozen in fear.
"You better stay the hell away from us, man,"
I told him. He then ran straight towards us as I held my fist up ready to hit him. He came really close to us, then jetted to the right straight into the woods. He just kept going until we couldn't see him. The 5 of us ran to the fence and then left. The next day, I asked my mom if she knew of anyone who owned that cemetery, and she said that the owners are usually there during the week just cutting the grass, and I should report what happened to them. Trevor and I went by a few days later and got to speak with the groundskeeper. We told him what happened, and he told us that we shouldn't be going to the old cemetery after hours. He lectured us for a short while, then addressed the concern that we had about the man. He told us they've caught all kinds of strange activity going on there at night. He said the most common are Satanists that come from the city at night and try performing odd rituals at the cemetery. He told us that he suspects the man to be a local who lives with his parents. He described the guy as an oddball who likes to walk around the cemetery during the day with no business being there. His description of the man was also pretty spot on from what I could remember seeing. I still to this day have not found out who that man might have been, but knowing now what I already know, I will never return to that cemetery at night. This happened when I was 12. It was nearing Halloween, so the town opened up a free haunted hayride for everyone. It was fun and kind of scary. It was set up at a local park near a football stadium, and they had their attractions set up on the huge open gazebo-like things. I was going with one of my friends, Kevin, who was the same age as me. We weren't very mature at the time, and I wish I would have done things differently. After we went to a few haunted houses they had set up, they finally had a spot open for us on the hayride. They drove us around while visiting these scary scenes they had set up. A school bus filled with zombies and a few humans begging to get out before the zombies chomped them down and then busted out of the school bus, which was surprising and really spooked me out a little. They began chasing after us while the driver just continued to drive. After a few more, we got off and went to the very last attraction. When we got in, there was an actor rocking back and forth in a chair, cradling a dead baby doll and sobbing quietly. After that, it was like a maze, except people would pop out of the corners and start walking, threatening you. Then we got to what we thought was the exit. It had a cage full of people clawing at you, dripped in fake blood, begging to be let out. There was a table with a chainsaw and fake gore all around it. Then you make your way into the woods, which we didn't know. That part was creepy because people just kept popping out at you. My friend Kevin, who's a bit of a wimp, then started crying when the skinwalker popped out and scared the hell out of us. He hid himself in a corner and the skinwalker just kept scaring him, which the other worker pointed at my friend and then directed me to go there and get him. This delayed us as we both had a curfew and a time to get back, so we kinda just rushed the rest. However, when we got out of the woods, we noticed someone following us. We thought it was just one of the workers, but they had a different ghost face costume. It looked cheaper, and we joked around saying that it wasn't actually a worker. We texted both of our moms that we were heading back, then started walking towards the exit. This guy was still following us, and we thought it was normal since it was a haunted Halloween experience. Others passed us, and he didn't seem to scare them or follow them. He tried to keep it low-key. Eventually, we saw him walk away when we got to the parking lot. We thought that was the end. After we made it into the neighborhoods, we had noticed a black SUV following us. I thought nothing of it, thinking since it's almost Halloween, it was just a bunch of teenagers probably trying to get a good scare out of us. Kevin didn't think so, and started speeding up, taking random turns, and we eventually found ourselves lost. The SUV was still following us. I then turned to him and said we should make a run for it, which he agreed, and we ran back into the streets and eventually found some place that we actually recognized. The SUV was still trailing behind us, and we didn't know what to do. so Kevin started texting his mom about what happened. The SUV kept getting closer and eventually slowed down when it was actually really near us. His mom said to come near the house and then go into the backyards to get into the house. We booked it, and the person in the SUV hopped out. It was the same ghost face that was following us, but this time he was carrying an actual kitchen knife. We thought this was a life or death situation, and adrenaline then kicked in. We just ran straight to his mom's house and started banging on the front door. He was coming closer now, and just as he was about to go up the stairs, my friend's mom opened the door saying that the police were on their way to the ghost face guy. He immediately ran and we assumed went straight to his car. After that, my dad came and picked me up. We contacted the haunted hayride manager. He told us that the only people dressed as Ghostface they had were there all night, then confirming that there was no worker at all. I don't know why, but Kevin's mom actually never called the police. It was just a bluff. We think that she didn't actually see the knife in his hand and just thought it was a worker who wanted to scare the hell out of some little kids. Which, if that really is the case, he took it way too far. This was Halloween night around 1980. I'm a 53-year-old man now, but I was 10 years old at the time of this story. We always had lots of trick-or-treaters in my neighborhood when I was a kid, so I always had a ball handing out candy to all of them. This particular night was winding down, and the trick-or-treaters had mostly been through and headed home. Well, as we were about to finish up and turn the light off, my mom had to run back into the house for something. This left me all alone on the front porch. About that time, I had noticed a strange car pull up next to the house next door with its lights off. A grown man steps out of the car and sneaks toward our house, using our trees for cover as he approaches. As he gets closer to me, he comes out to reveal that he has some sort of Leatherface looking mask on, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre killer. For a few seconds, he just stands there staring at me. Then he makes a couple of fake charges like he's going to run and chase me. Right about this time, my mom comes back outside as a last group of trick-or-treaters then come along. This person also notices this, and he then retreated to his car and then left rather quickly. I've wondered for decades whether or not this guy had any ill intent, or if it was just regular Halloween fun. It was a strange car, and I knew mostly everyone's cars by sight. It's one of my useless talents. Could he have been out looking for a kidnapping victim and my mom's timing prevented it? Not too scary for most, I'm sure, but it's something I'll always wonder about and get a little cold chill whenever I relive it in my head. I'm a male from Canada, and this story takes place 7 years ago. I was 17 and my little brother had just turned 13. He wanted to go trick-or-treating with me because his friend group had a bit of a falling out. And well, certain friends really refused to associate with others. It was a big mess and my brother didn't want to miss out on trick-or-treating. So although I felt too old for it, I took him. My brother dressed up as Dracula, and I just dressed in all black and wore a Jason mask. Low effort maybe, but it was something easy to throw together at the last minute. Our parents were in the house and we set off. I took my brother to some of my friends' houses and they gave him some extra candy since they know him. We had 2 big cloth pouches with us so we could get more treats. This also meant we couldn't see inside our bag the way we would if we carried one of those plastic pumpkin baskets. After we'd been out for about an hour, my brother was still in a spooky spirit, and he asked me if we could venture out of our neighborhood and into one of the more richer areas. See, my parents never allowed me when I was a kid to trick-or-treat far away, and they wouldn't have allowed my brother to do so either. But since I was with him and old enough to keep him safe, I figured that it wouldn't be a big deal. I called my dad and asked, and he said my mom said it was okay as long as I got my brother home for 9 p.m. and as long as we got a taxi or bus. I agreed and I called a taxi to take us on the 20-minute drive into the richer areas. The 5-bedroom houses looked like palaces compared to ours. Since we didn't know the area very well, we decided to only do 1 or 2 streets to avoid getting lost in the dark. Besides, we already had plenty of candy, and we were being a little greedy asking for even more. Most of the houses actually had the candy on the porch, and you just picked what you wanted. There wasn't much left in those baskets, but we knocked on some houses. The last house we knocked on was a large gray detached house with a slightly darker shade of gray on the roof. The house was modern looking like the rest on the street with big glass windows, and the house had 1 light on upstairs. If that light hadn't been on, we wouldn't have knocked and we would have just been on our way, but we decided to try before going home. I knocked on the door and a tall man who appeared to be in his early 40s answered the door. He had dark hair, and I couldn't tell if it was black or brown because the entryway was still in pitch black darkness. He had light blue shorts on and a black t-shirt with black socks. He smiled at us, and my brother then told him trick or treat. "Ah, you're here to suck on my blood," the man said in a terrible Romanian accent, grinning from ear to ear at my brother. I had to hold in a laugh as my brother bared his fangs and put one of his hands into a menacing claw gesture. The man pretended to cower away before standing upright again and asking my brother if he would like a bloody treat. My brother said yes, and the man held his hand out. For a moment, I thought he was trying to shake my brother's hand, which I thought was weird. So I put my arm around my brother and then said, "Hey man, I'm not trying to be rude, but my brother can't shake hands with strangers." I thought I saw a flash of something on the man's face, but it was gone quicker than it arrived, so I couldn't dwell on it for too long. He apologized and he said he wanted to take my brother's bag to put more candy in it, as it was in his kitchen cabinet. He explained that he thought the trick-or-treaters were finished, so he had moved a basket back inside. Before I could even say anything back, my brother then said, "Here you go," and handed him his bag. The man smiled at us before turning his back and then disappearing inside. I'd never had someone do that before, but I didn't want to make a scene, and I told myself I'd look at my brother's candy before he ate it. It didn't look like the man put any lights on, but he left his front door open. I don't know if he expected us to follow him or not, but we didn't. He came back moments later clutching the bag at the top before handing it back carefully to my brother. "You two have a good night now," he said before closing the door abruptly. We walked down the path and I got my phone out to call a taxi. My brother opened his bag and peered inside, gushing about how much candy he had. I had a peek too, and I told him we'd done well. When we got home, we went to the dining table and laid out our candy. I told my brother that I wanted to check his out, and he wasn't bothered by that and started eating some of mine. As I moved the candy, I then saw a CD among the wrappers. It was the kind of silver disc that you'd burn back in the early 2000s, like a mixtape or something, which I knew about because despite not being old enough back then to do it, I was aware of it when I was a kid. I grabbed it, and on the other side, "For D" had been written. I frowned and had a bad feeling. I told my parents, telling them about the man from before. My brother's candy hadn't been opened, and it was all fine, so he was way too busy eating to really pay attention to us. My parents were concerned and wanted to know what was on the disc. I had a friend whose parents had a really old tiny TV with a built-in DVD player on the back of it. It was in the basement and unused, but they kept it just in case they ever needed it. The TV was like 12 inches, and basically you could insert the disc in the slot on the back of the TV and then use the remote to watch the DVDs or play a CD. I told my parents I would take it over there and give it a look. They were hesitant, and my mom wanted to just throw it in the trash, but my dad and I insisted on seeing. My dad put the disc in the drawer in the living room for safety, and the next day he came with me to my friend's house to use the TV. He told me that he wasn't sure I should stay in the room, but I told him I'd found it, and if the guide gave my brother a disc, I wanted to know why. My friend was home alone because his mom was at work, and she was a single mom. It was lunchtime, and we all then piled into the basement and put the disc in the slot. It went in, and the screen stayed black for about a minute. I was thinking it was a dude, but then the screen panned out and we could see light and noise started coming from the TV. My dad yelled at me and my friend to go up to the basement stairs, and it took me a second to move because I was so shocked. The noises were sexual, and the camera was moving to show a sex scene. My dad fumbled with the remote trying to turn it off before I got up and unplugged the TV. All three of us just stood in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute. My dad told us to go upstairs while he gets the disc out, and my friend explained to him how to do it before it started to play again. My dad followed us up, and when we got outside, he threw the disc on the gravel and then stomped on it. He was red with fury, and so was I. I then told my dad where that freak lived, and he started pacing up and down my friend's walkway trying to calm down. He told me that he had to get me home before he did anything, so we piled into the car and drove home. My dad then said that he wanted to go to that guy's house and make him sorry, but when we got home and told my mom, she then insisted that we call the police, and then she told my dad not to do anything stupid. So my dad called the police and they came to interview me and my dad. My mom hadn't seen all the things that we did, so she didn't have to be interviewed for as long. I didn't know the guy's address by heart, but I could tell them where the house was. We then told my brother that the man hadn't given him candy. He had given him a dodgy disc and he was in big trouble for it. He was really embarrassed and creeped out, but it wasn't his fault, and we told him that. The police kept in touch, and things only got creepier from here. They ended up going to the house as well as looking into the background of it, and they informed us that no one was actually living there. My brother and I were shaking when we heard this. The police knew about the house being in darkness except one lit room we could see from the upper windows. They said that they looked inside the house, but all the lights were off now, and that no one was living there. Inside there was barely any furniture, and the police believed the room we saw light emitting from was an empty bedroom. This freaked us out. We couldn't show the police the disc though because my dad had smashed it in a rage. We know it was a man and woman in the video from what we briefly heard, but I have no idea if the man in the video was the same man who gave us the disc, or if he just downloaded some random porno from the internet. It really makes me sick to my stomach to know that this creep tried to expose my little brother to porn. If I hadn't been there, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. The cops have still not found the guy. My parents forbade my brother from ever going near that neighborhood ever again. And when he trick-or-treats with his friends, my dad always goes with them to keep watch. My brother thought it cramped his style, but my dad didn't care, and I understood. I'm 24 now, and my brother is 20 and in college in the heart of our city. This incident still creeps us out, and my brother and I agree that if we ever have children, we won't be letting them trick-or-treat alone. Despite all the years that have passed, we still avoid that area, and I think we always will. I'm 20 years old, but at the time I had just turned 9 years old since my birthday's in October. My dad's side of the family all agreed to go trick-or-treating, so as you might imagine, that's a lot of kids. We drive over to the neighborhood that we were going to. My cousins and I agreed to go as a pirate crew. We started to walk and I ended up falling behind because my boot untied, and I'm a slow walker as well. For some info, at the time I couldn't speak any English, but I could understand some things. As I bend down to tie my shoe, I hear someone talking. They kept saying something about candy, so I started to hear them a bit more clearly, and I heard a click like from a camera. I then walked away scared. I was a bit paranoid as a kid. I eventually catch up with my cousins and look back to see this guy in a ghillie suit, which is a camouflage type bush suit that they use in the military. We keep going, and not even 5 minutes afterwards, this guy's behind a whole nother family, but I just ignore it because he wasn't bothering me anymore. Speed up to around 8:30. I fall behind yet again, and I can hear someone calling me a good little girl. I look around and see bushes, and there was like 3 to 4 of them. Then across the street, I see a playground with about 6 to 7 girls playing, along with 2 older women watching them. I look back to see my family at the next door already knocking. As I'm about to move past the bushes, I feel a hand then grab me, and due to me being jumpy, I moved away and my uncle then saw me, then came to grab me. My uncle didn't see the guy trying to grab me, he just wanted me to move faster with the group. We eventually finished trick-or-treating around 9, almost 10 p.m. The next day on the news, I hear that there were at least 4 girls who went missing from the park across from where I almost got grabbed at. Now, I don't know if they're connected or not, but when I tell you that this guy kept telling after me and other girls throughout the night, it really makes me think that it was probably him.